So, you've gotten into Warhammer 40,000 or some other game of choice, and you are at the happy-go-lucky position of trying to pick which army or which faction you're going to play. I'm going to give you a surefire guide to make sure that you're satisfied with the choice you're making in that game. Check this out. Okay, so you've decided to get into Warhammer or whatever game you're playing, and this guide is actually going to work for just about any system that you choose, but you need to pick an army, a faction. You need to actually decide what you're going to play. Now, depending on what your focus in the game is, this is going to be different, and I'm going to break this down into 3 simple steps that you basically need to do. 3 things you need to ask yourself, figure out, do the work on, that's actually going to give you the result of choosing a faction or an army that works for you, that meets your requirements, that meets your needs, and that you're ultimately satisfied with. So get your chisels out. You're going to want to write this down. You're going to want to work the problem as I'm actually talking to you, and you're probably going to want to take notes. So this is a good time to do that right here, right now. Maybe after you hit the like button, but just right here. Step number 1, you need to ask yourself a question, and that basically is, what is your purpose in the game, or why are you playing this game? Okay. And depending on your answer, you can come up with any number of things. It could be because your friends play. It could be because you want to get into tournaments. It could be because you like the look of the models. This is going to be different for every single person, and it's going to shape what you do to choose your factions, choose your armies. Some of the most common ones are to be a competitive player. There are people who like playing in tournaments, who like being competitive, who want to get recognition, or they just want to be the best. They have that whole, Rocky mentality. Okay, fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But it means that your focus in the game is then going to be choosing something that's based on performance, that's based on statistical analysis of what does well, what works, what are other people playing, your local meta, most effective tactics available, what's actually going on in the bigger international tournament scene, state of the rules. There's a lot to keep up there, okay? If you're just playing with your friends and you literally are just having fun, you're not there for professional gaming, you're not there for tournaments, you're just a casual gamer, this is going to boil down to more like, what are they playing, what's taken, if you will, what's available, what would be an interesting counterpoint. Those kind of things might come into mind. If you're playing just because you like the look of models, you literally, picked up an army book, or you looked at the models in the store, on the website, or something like that, that's really just rule of cool in the simplicity. And I know people are going to say, always go with rule of cool. It's not always going to leave you happy, especially if you're going for a very specific purpose. So the first thing you absolutely need to do is, before you even start deciding on any of this stuff, just answer the question for yourself. Why are you playing this game? Why are you getting involved in this hobby? What is your purpose? What do you want to get out of it? If you can answer that question, then you're going to go ahead and move on to the second step, okay? Second step is research. And again, this is going to vary depending on what exactly you've answered for the first part, which is why you're doing it. This is where you really dig in and find out what it is that's going to answer that question, solve that need, okay? If you want a top tier tournament list, you're going to be looking up tournament results locally, internationally. You're going to be getting your hands on different things like feedback from players. You're going to be going on things like Reddit and Facebook and Discord. You're going to be watching various YouTube videos like this one and actually seeing what people are using and what they're doing that's successful. And you're going to be keeping up on the rules for that game, which means you're going to need the most recent updates. You're going to need the rule books. You're going to need the army books or faction books, codexes as we call them in 40K. You're going to very much need to do a lot of digging into the rules, and you're going to have to be very familiar with how the game works. That's just going to be its own part if you're playing that way. If you're playing casual, well, okay, you want to talk to your friends and kind of see what they're looking to do. Maybe they don't want to get huge armies, and maybe they don't want to have big collections. Maybe this is something they're just kind of wading into and seeing how it goes. Well, all right, number 1, you're not going to be buying that much then. Number 2, you're probably going to, do free rules and stuff. But number 3, you're just going to want to know what it is they're playing so that you're not all copycatting each other. For example, have you ever walked into a gaming store and you look around and you just want to find out what everyone's playing? And okay, cool. So you're playing Space Marines. What do you have? Space Marines. Got it. Space Marines, Chaos Space Marines. Very good flavor. And Space Marines. Okay, good. So you obviously are not going to have a fun time if you're in a group of your friends and you all play the same army. That's just probably not going to work out, and you're probably going to want to do something different. Like, okay, I'll play Eldar, I'll play Chaos, I'll play Necrons, I'll play Orcs. Do something different in that sense, okay? You really just need to tie this back to the first question and look around for the thing that interests you most that solves that problem. I'm going to go over at the end how I did that, what those things were for me. Maybe that helps you out. But in short, step number 2 is just do all your research. And another thing about this, another thing to utilize is the internet. It may come down to just looking at models. It may come down to looking at tournament results. It may come down to reading rules. That's all more or less available at your fingertips without spending a penny. If you just go to websites like the company website that supports the game, in this case, Games Workshop. If you go to social media, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Reddit, Twitter, Discord, you'll find people to talk to, and you can actually pick their brains and ask them, hey, you know, have you played in tournaments? What did you use? What's a good fun starter army for someone just playing casually? How difficult is it to learn how to play Eldar? What's the learning curve on Necrons? Hey, this model's really cool, but I have no idea what it is. Insert picture here. Can someone tell me? My friends are playing blah, 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 and blah. What's a good counterpoint to that? Or whatever it is. Have conversations, take the time and do your research and actually dig into what is involved in the choice you're making. Okay? Step 3, and this is going to be a little more on the conditional side, but step 3 is really just to try that thing out. Now, this is easier for some systems than others, but it's actually to go ahead and see if you can somehow get into that game and try that thing, actually go do it. All right. And you're not going to know if this works until you get some kind of activity along that line. Now, certain things make this easier. There's, for instance, if you're playing Warhammer, you could play something like one-page rules, which is a free gaming system. You can literally use army men or literal paper dolls to represent miniatures. You're not spending money that way. You can kind of see how the game works, how that faction plays. There are websites online where you can find the full rules for Warhammer 40,000. The core rules are available. The data cards are available for free on Warhammer Community. So realistically, you have all that data. You could paper doll the whole game. You're going to want to do that probably once or twice. Or better, if you know someone who plays that game and maybe has some spare models, ask them to play a demo game. Ask them to proxy, which means to use models that are physically one thing but represent another. In other words, you want to play Eldar, but your friend has Space Marines and Chaos. Okay, ask him, can I use one of your armies and can we pretend this is Eldar and would you mind playing a game with me? Most gamers are very friendly and they're not going to mind doing this kind of thing. So it's really not a problem. And seeing as they're probably trying to grow their gaming groups as well, it's not a problem for them to let you in, let you try that out, give you a few games, give you some pointers, and really let you feel the game out. Some of this, to some degree, like tournament playing, is obviously much more involved. You're going to need more miniatures, you're going to need them painted, you're going to really have to grind out some experience to really see what that's like and if it works in a tournament setting. But if you've done your research in step 2, and if it really does solve the need in step 1, you should have that covered. Okay, you actually can learn, you can do the research, you can do all the digging needed to get something that is going to satisfy you without a total random hit or miss probability. It is possible, trust me. Those are really the 3 things you need to do to pick any army, any faction. And again, this is not just applicable to Warhammer. This is applicable if you're going to play A Song of Ice and Fire or Battletech or any tabletop game that you're really getting into, you can do. This would even break down to something as simple in a tabletop roleplay game. What class or what character or what race do I want to play? Well, okay, fine. What are you trying to do in the game? What do you want to be able to do? What are your friends doing? What does your group have? What does your group need? A good question at that point is like, what class do they not have? I'm sure you guys have probably seen times where there's a group of players and everybody's a badass wizard or a barbarian or a fighter or a paladin, and there's not one cleric to be found in the whole party. Well, guess what? You probably have a very niche role that you could step into as. Okay, fine. Or maybe everybody's playing as elves and you want to be the one guy who plays as a tiefling. Or you want to be a human, or you want to be a halfling just because. Well, okay, fine. You can step in that way. So you see, this really is applicable to anything you could want to get into gaming-wise. It's not just limited to one game, one set. Those 3 questions, those 3 steps are really workable anywhere. It's just a matter of you digging in, doing the work, and committing to the free part that is just your own goal in the game or the hobby. Doing the digging to find out what that's about, how it works, what's going to meet that need for you, and then trying it out to really make sure you're there. And then you can buy the models. Then you can buy the paints. Then you can get into all the investing and digging and really go nuts on your plastic crack addiction, because trust me, it'll be a plastic crack addiction. As I said, I would kind of list out and go into how I made those choices, what it was for me. So when I started in 40K, this was back in 3rd edition. We're now in 10th. That was 1997, 1998. I went the route of Rule of Cool. I had a friend that had an extra army. He was playing Space Wolves at the time, and he had some Chaos Space Marines. So he literally played 2 or 3 games with me, and it was literally me asking him, how do I do this? How does this work? Everything. It was very rudimentary. But I got those games in, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to get my own models. I'm going to get my own army. And what actually sold me was just looking around my game store. This is the 3rd edition Eldar Codex. If you have a copy of this or can find one, it's a great read. It's a great book, and it really gives you a good perspective in how things were in that edition. But what really grabbed me was the cover, because most codexes look like this. And this is the 3rd edition Dark Angels Codex, and it was just kind of very stark. And there was this colorful, very aesthetic sort of looking army, and going through, that's pretty much what you saw inside the book as well. These guys had a lot of neat gimmicks and cool things to offer. The armies were great looking. There was just some absolutely amazing artwork in here. It was what really sold me. It was Rule of Cool based on the looks of the models and the fact that, oddly enough, that was the store where everybody played Space Marines. Nobody was playing other factions. So I was really like, good, I want to be the guy doing something else. So for me, Eldar was a win-win on 2 fronts. The problem I ran into, and that I wasn't aware of, is that in 3rd edition, Eldar were very, very fragile. Okay, they were very much the glass cannon army. If you use everything perfectly, if it's all in the right place, if it's all perfectly timed, you will hit like a ton of bricks and slay all in your path. But as a complete newbie to the game and a complete newbie to the faction, that was not my experience. So it took a lot of games and a lot of time and a lot of work getting into the point where I felt I was enjoying myself instead of putting work into playing the game and enjoying the hobby. Now, that got a little bit easier towards the end of 3rd edition when the Eye of Terror campaign came out. And what we had here was the advent of the Ulthwé Strike Force. Ulthwé is a sub-faction of the Eldar army, and they got special rules and fluff to go along with this campaign that I found in gameplay and in lore very, very entertaining. So now I'm almost getting into that tournament rules-oriented gaming aspect and frame of mind, as well as the lore. I'm not just looking at models and what looks awesome. It's like, I'm really jazzed about the Ulthwé craft world. The fact that these guys have tons of psychers. They have a standing army of guardians. They don't have a lot of aspects, so they're very much more like a standing military than they are a home defending itself, more like a citizen type situation, a citizen militia or whatnot. So that was what got me into Eldar, and I still play Eldar. I still love the models. They've only improved over time, and it's still a great faction. Some of the same situations still carry over. They are more fragile. They tend to be more specifically used. You can't just throw something at any unit and expect it to live. You can't put it in any situation and expect it to kill everything in its path. It does take a degree of finesse, but they're still very much an enjoyable army. So that paid off. The research I did and the learning I did and all the experience of that 20-some years absolutely paid off. So that's how that went. My other army, as I already showed you, was Dark Angels. Now, this was a very interesting choice, probably more meta-oriented. My friends all chose different Space Marine chapters to play. I was having a rough time with Eldar, so I picked this up as a second army. Now, I already had my friend Jason playing Space Wolves. My friend Jeff played Blood Angels. We later on got a guy in the group named Chris who played Black Templars. So all the special chapters were sort of picked except for one. And green being my favorite color, that kind of went along and worked just fine. And again, Rule of Cool. But as I looked through the lore and I looked through the codex and I started learning more about the different units and what made the Dark Angel special, I was right at home. Sort of knightly monk themed space marines that are big on secrecy. They're very tough. They're very resolute. They don't retreat. They have some heavier guns. They have a lot more firepower. Some special units. I was absolutely great. They were very grimdark in 3rd edition, more so than they are now, in my opinion. If you want to see kind of what they were like, I highly recommend, again, getting a hold of this codex and take a look at those armies. This was this actually has 2nd edition models in it. This one was more or less complete 3rd. And again, very, very grimdark. And playing Space Marines to learn the game was very easy for me. It was very quick to pick up. They're a very adaptable army, very forgiving to a newbie who will make mistakes, doesn't know all the rules, doesn't know what to expect, doesn't know all the opposing armies. Very, very handy to start up with. That's kind of where I've been, and I've played between those. Obviously now you've seen my build videos. I'm working with Tyranids. I have some Necrons. I've played Tau. I've branched out into other games, so I've been around the block a little bit to know how this all goes. And these are just my tips. This is what worked for me. This was what was successful, and this is something that I can impart to you guys and maybe save you some of the brain scratching, the figure, the how do I do this, the difficulty of it. So I hope that's been useful for you. So again, I hope you took some notes. If you have questions, if you want to bounce an idea off me or any other gamer in your group, you absolutely should. I'm always open to comments. You can email me. You can find me on various social media and just send me a message or, tweet, comment, whatever it is, wherever it is. I'm all over the place under the same name, Savage Brewski. And I'd be happy to help you out and give you my 2 cents on what you're trying to do. So again, there you go. So dive into your hobby, figure out what it is you want to do in it, research, and try it out. If this has been useful to you, please do leave a like. If you have a friend that's trying to get into something and this might help them, obviously share the video around. Subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll catch you on the next video. Stay savage, guys.